Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian Athey, and I'm here with Trent Heminger today, the king of small condo sales in Washington, D.C., who's probably sold more small condo projects than just about anybody, right?
Yeah, but probably at this point, 2020, 2022,
Yeah.
2021.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've been doing it for how long?
Almost 21, on my 21st year.
Yeah, so a good long time selling condos in and out of cycles, and what we're talking about today really is the best practices in developing and selling condo projects to maximize, a successful result for folks. So, Trent, I've developed a bunch of condo projects, and obviously you've sold a bunch for me, and obviously my borrowers have also, many of them have, had you sell projects for them. So in your mind, when somebody's looking at a project to potentially develop, what do you think the most important thing that they ought to do? I mean, I have my thoughts on my end. What about you?
Well, I think probably the most important, and sometimes where I find the biggest mistakes and misconceptions, are making sure that they really know what they're buying. So sometimes I think they hear about the zoning, or they think they know better than anyone else, and they don't actually understand the zoning and what they're actually getting. I often am asked to analyze a project, and I'm not told, do we have parking? Are we getting outside space? Is there a roof deck? So, I mean, just a few of those factors right there could be, 10% of their exit values, and if they have them,
it can make a huge difference. I mean, you've got to understand zoning first and foremost. So whether it's having a zoning lawyer who looks at it, or in my case, having a trusted architect or multiple architects to analyze a project, provide you with a simple zoning analysis, so that you know what you can actually do, right? Because what you can do, for example, in the RF1 zone today with the 10-foot rule is different than what you could do there, 4 years ago, And with some of the complexities in other zoning districts, you really have to understand. And I think the problem, especially with newer developers, is that they often rely on, real estate agents who may not understand zoning, who are trying to get them to buy a project, or developers who may not understand it or may not be fully disclosing what's going on.
Well, and I think what I find sometimes with them is sometimes they're buying from someone else. They're buying from a salesperson, right? So it's kind of like buying a car, or whatever it may be. You go for it's an emotional purchase because you're trying to make money, but someone may tell you what you can do, but they also may tell you the exit values in a really good market and with really high-end finishes, but yet your budget may not include those high-end finishes, or the zoning could have changed and you may not be able to get a roof deck with straight stairs. You may not have to have a hatch, which often could go for less money. So if someone's selling you on it, and you really should consult then with someone else outside of the person selling you the project, just to verify that you can do what you think you can do before it's too late.
Yeah, it's about, can you do what you think you can do? Is it about, will it sell for what you think it will sell for? I mean, I can't tell you how many projects over the years I've looked at where somebody comes to me and says, I want to borrow in X location, and I'm doing 4 condo units, and I'm going to sell out for $2.8 million when the real number is $2.55 million, right? I mean, that's a big difference.
It's a big difference, and it's most of the time. A lot of times, it's people's profit.
Well,
especially if they're first-time home buyers, developers, because those are the ones that are often not. They don't know the details. And their margins are tight. I think.
And one of the other things I see a lot of times with first-time or second-time early on developers is that they'll, maybe they've renovated a house, or they've renovated their bathrooms and their kitchen or whatever, and they think, oh yeah, I can develop this 2-unit condo with this really tiny construction budget, but I'm still going to get these really big numbers. And you're like, those really big numbers, when they're actually obtained, are usually done by experienced people with great layouts, with great finishes, and with a really good sales and marketing team. It's not like finding some dude with a truck to do the construction who's patching it together and providing a mediocre or sub-mediocre product.
And when you get into, it's one thing if you're developing a house, and you can mess up or maybe not be quite as detailed on your layouts, and it's a big house, so it's the big living area, it's a big kitchen, so if your kitchen's a little off, it's not a big deal. But when you start dumbing them down into smaller spaces, the layouts are extremely important. And I think a lot of the developers that are newer are focused on the acquisition closing on time, the interest rates as part of your acquisition, construction costs, and they're not paying attention to the actual layouts.
Yeah.
And having someone come in and say, wait a second, but why do you have, 3 full baths when you only need 2, and you can save your money there, or why don't we have, 2 full baths upstairs, whatever it may be. Also, I think the next step after acquisition is making sure that the layouts are fine-tuned before you start construction. And a lot of times, and especially a lot of times when newer developers are inheriting the plans, those plans were done just to get the permits to be sold, and the fine-tuning of the plans are the difference of making money on a project.
I mean, Trent will tell you that when we go over bump, my process is that we get a zoning analysis. Once we're sort of interested in a piece of real estate, we get a zoning analysis. We then email Trent what we think we can do. We say, hey, what do you think the exit values are? He sends us a spreadsheet with a safe, projection and a goal projection on pricing. And then once we actually are underway, I mean, we take those floor plans that we get from the architect. And by the way, we're using very experienced architects, and we spend hours, working on them. In this particular unit, there's not enough closet space. Trent's big in closet space. I'm kind of like, I don't have that many clothes anyway, so I don't need big closets. It's, you've got to make sure that the things people really want and need are there, you know? And the difference between, does this unit have outdoor space, which obviously is really important and more important than ever during the pandemic, or does it not? I mean, the impact of that on pricing is, things like that can be really significant.
And those can be adjusted, but a lot of times, like for example, a closet, sometimes you can't just throw a closet in if it's a small bedroom afterwards. But if you need a closet in the beginning, we could shift the bathroom over a foot to then give a foot back to the bedroom to create a closet. But if you don't catch that on paper, to then go into your framing walkthroughs and catch it, there is no rewinding.
That's right.
And not at a flawless transition. And that is important, and it is missed a lot. And again, closets, but it's not just closets, it's a lot of different things. Why do you have a tub and a tub shower combination in the primary suite, and the hall bath you have a shower? Well, why wouldn't we reverse those? And those are minor things, but again, when an architect's throwing the plans together, most architects, seasoned developers are going to come back and help tweak them, and when they don't, it gets lost in the transition of the project.
So what is your view on tubs? I mean, like, for example, does every 2 bedrooms should have a tub and a shower, or do you think 2 showers is okay, or do you think it's the location?
It's a good question. I mean, I do, hands down, I think it's the 80-20 rule, and 80% of the time, if you're going to have 2 full baths, you need to have a tub.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I've been getting into my now 3rd decade of, doing this career, and back, especially 15 to 20 years ago, really probably 12 to 20 years ago, people thought about having a family, or they started their family initially, and they were out. They were moving to a house. They were moving to the suburbs. They stay and they start their families, in the city, and often and sometimes 700 to 800 square feet. As crazy as it may sound to myself and you, a lot of people, that's a decent amount of space. But we both have little kids, and not having a tub is not a good way to go.
You have to have a tub with little kids. I mean, I lived in a Capitol Hill row house that was pretty small for a while, and having the tub on the top level, my shower, and then we had another bathroom upstairs with a tub. It was critical when my little boy was really young. But what else in the process do you think is helpful to the audience to make sure they get it right from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, one, we talked about like the layouts, which I think are the most important, but then I also think the finish level is very important. And I think when I say the finish level, don't assume what other people like. And I used to joke, but I'll say it now because I had to. It's like we have a lot of developers and their spouses haven't let them decorate or pick out a finish in a house or whatever it may be their entire lives, but next thing you know, they have free reign and they choose what they think they like, and it doesn't make sense, and it's about consistency. I learned this a long time ago, in my own personal residence when we hired a designer for the first time, and I thought, I know what I'm doing, and but we'll try it. And they learn like you got to have consistency throughout the entire place, and you can tell often a seasoned developer to someone that's just trying it just by walking in and like you got one style in the kitchen and a different style in the bathroom, and it doesn't photograph well. And we all know in this day and age, a lot of your buyers that buy, they already decided if they're going to buy or not before they even walk in the door based on photos. So you just need a good flow, and also like don't think you're going to get $10,000 more because you spent $5,000 more on the appliance package.
Yeah.
Sometimes it makes sense and you need that appliance package, but often, in the condo development world that you work with and loan in, in DC, a lot of the buyers, as long as they're good quality appliances, they don't know the difference of $5,000 versus a $10,000
and they don't really
appliance.
care. I mean, they'd rather you spend more money on something that's beautiful that sort of affects the way they feel, other than like an appliance. Yeah, it's funny because the things that I see with finishes often are that like the newbies will try to put like a blue backsplash or like something really like that shocks you. You're like, yeah, it shocks you and turns off like 80% of the potential buyers. The other thing that you see a fair amount is like some of the construction folks who get into it, for the first time as developers. It's like the Home Depot sale rack projects, where you go through and you're like, I'm pretty sure that a lot of this was like just on the table in Home Depot and they cobbled it together. It's because you have some stuff that looks really good, and then you have lights that are like, whoa, they actually make lights like this.
Well, and if you buy your pendants and you got it on a clearance, that's really great until one of your painters breaks the globe the week before settlement and you can't find a matching one, right?
Yeah.
Then you're replacing 3 versus
speaking
one.
of pendants, to give a shout out to a developer in the city that I know, I think it was Sean Brewer's project. I walked one of them recently, and the pendants were just really beautiful and well done. And like I personally think, Trent talks about the pendant stuff quite a bit, but you walk in, you see the kitchen and the kitchen island, and you see somebody just nail the lighting. It makes a big difference.
It makes a big difference. It's what you remember. And again, what's going to photograph well? Sometimes you mentioned blue backsplash. Sometimes that blue backsplash is like the really greatest thing if you can see it in person. But if it's a little obnoxious when you photograph it, and we just can't photograph it properly, it's going to prevent people from coming in the door. And all it's going to do is get the buyer, because they're like, oh my gosh, I actually like this better. But they might get a better deal on the project, on the condo, because no one else wanted to come even look at it. But that's not putting money in the developer's pocket.
That's interesting. Are you seeing any more, variation in like cabinet colors and the like? Are you seeing, like I have a friend who did blue cabinets in their kitchen, since we're talking about blue. Are you seeing more things like that?
Yeah,
no?
The answer is yes, and I think the thing is I still make it very clear, and this, I'm still fine with white kitchens for a lot of the condo projects because they're safe. A lot of the buyers are looking for safe.
They go with a lot of different things, right? So the buyer can imagine, like, all right, if I get tired of this backsplash, I can replace it.
Exactly.
Or
so I'm not against it, but but more today and going into 2021 than by far I would have said 4 or 5 years ago when people started to try to get away from the white cabinets. I do think that buyers are more turned on by something different today, but doing something different has to be done properly, and it's very hard, I think, still, and because you buy the finishes, so you know more than I do, getting away from the white cabinets that have been perfected and good pricing has been perfected to go into something new. It's going to cost more, and if it's not costing you more, you got to be very careful that the material is going to not be the
to that end, it's important to go there and like see the cabinets, feel them, understand whether they're quality product or not, and
again, it goes back to photographing. So trying to do 2 tones, a different color at the top versus the bottom, that's a really great concept in a house. I'm not saying it doesn't work in a condo, but when you're taking maybe a kitchen run of 12 feet and you're turning it into a condo and the kitchen runs 7 feet, those are big differences, and just making sure that they're going to correlate properly to what your vision is, and that's where you might want to consult with the designer, or at least someone that can reference you into seeing things that have actually been finished.
Well, your point earlier about making sure it's all cohesive, like it all comes together. That's what designers do a good job of. They, instead of like falling in love with this tile, but that tile doesn't really go with the theme of the unit, they sort of look at it holistically, right? Yeah, it's interesting. So this is sort of a random question, but are you seeing, because of the lingering pandemic, people buy just on photographs? Meaning, like, do people just, are you selling many condos where people don't ever set foot in them?
Yeah, good question. So I mean, it's happened for years, but it's happened, I shouldn't say for years, but it's happened over the last several years. But during the pandemic, it was happening more.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we saw more at the beginning of the pandemic was buyers, it's not that they necessarily maybe didn't see, but they were not going to see 10. They were going to see their top 3.
Yeah.
And that maybe, they chose only online. We often had a lot of agents that were actually going and FaceTiming the buyers. But again, you still don't, no matter how good you do, you don't get the whole sense of it without being in the space. So that is where it's got to photograph well. But with that said, we don't see people that are buying sight unseen extremely often, but it doesn't happen, absolutely. But are people using the process of elimination through photos, through online, through virtual tours, etc.? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So moving on from the sort of the finishes and that side of it, in terms of the marketing and selling of the product, like what's the key to nail it? In terms of getting the prices that are, I was going to say the price that you want. Nobody gets exactly what they want. That's part of like a give and take in a transaction, but getting what something's really worth.
Yeah.
Right?
So I think that the key is, if anyone that's listening to this and they follow the market at all, you don't even have to really follow to know that, in the DC, it's not the DMV, but it's throughout the entire country, the market's been crazy. But I have a lot of people that say, well, my condo project's going to sell for a lot because the market's crazy. Well, the single family market, the single family homes that you are not really building, especially if you're in the close DMV, your Arlingtons, Bethesdas, and of course DC, those are homes that are, if you're getting a new home, often it's because you're tearing something down. So you're not seeing it. So that market's extremely crazy. The condo market has stayed pretty steady since the pandemic, but we've had a little bit of a pickup and a little bit of a slowdown, but nothing that has gone super high up, nothing that's gone super low.
I think here it's been steady steady but unspectacular for a number of years in the condo market. Yeah. Isn't that what you think?
100%. Yeah. We're just not seeing a ton of appreciation, but we're not seeing a dip either, but patience. So when it comes down to when it comes to the marketing, and this is part of what I was bringing up, is if you throw a single family, or even if you just put on the market a resale condominium, it's all about pricing. Yeah. If it's priced right, people come look at it immediately. If the buyers are educated, whether it's just because they're smart, whether it's because they've been online looking for 9 months before they even found a real estate agent to help them, they have a pretty good idea of what something's worth and how much the place is unique, or you can find 5 of them within a 20-block radius or 10-block radius. So pricing is really important. I think with the condo project, it is about pricing, and often that comes down to having a really experienced agent, because you've joked with me that I'll say when we're together, we got 5 offers on this house, or you've heard 10 offers, and it went up 10% over the list price, and you always say with condos, what's a multiple offer?
Yeah,
right?
I don't even know what that means. I'd have to look it up in the dictionary because it doesn't really happen. Yeah.
Because it just doesn't happen in new construction. And with new construction, the key is to look at whether it's 5 units or whether it's 20, is you've got to price the building right, not 1 or 2 units. And sometimes that means maybe you price the top floor that might be the best, the best views. Maybe you price that extremely reasonable and you price your lower units a little bit higher, because it makes your upper units look like they're better values. Yeah. And if you really are selling at a better value, we can get the higher numbers for the lower floors. But whatever it is, you've got to get people in the door. And the biggest mistake, hands down, and one of my big pet peeves, is when a developer comes to me and they tell me what something's worth. Yeah. I sold 300 new construction condos alone this year. I know what things are worth.
Yeah, well, it's like our relationship when he says to me, you should lower the price by, X amount, and I just say yes every time, because he knows more about what it's worth than I do, because A, he's more objective, and B, I'm not selling 300 condos a year, right? Yeah. I mean, rely on experts is one of the real obvious messages of today.
And as long as, developers out there are working with an agent that they trust, I mean, the key for being an agent is you want to work with people you like. You want them to trust you, and you want to trust them. So I, being myself as a good agent where there are plenty of them out there, we don't have any intention of lowering prices just to get a quick sale. What's a quick sale to us? We're going to sell it anyhow. We want to get our clients the most amount of money. Right. But I always say, you also don't hire me to feel rich. You hire me to get things sold, to get money in your account. You can't sell things if they're overpriced. And buyers and other agents do not take you seriously when they're not priced properly. And you need serious buyers and agents that have confidence to get them sold. So when it comes to the marketing, yes, you've got a stage. You know, I call it the 3 Ps. It's people come to me, why is something not selling? Well, let's look at the 3 Ps. Is it presentation? If it doesn't present itself well, we got to start. Like whether it's staging.
Well, I mean, I have a loan on a 2-unit condo now where like there's no real staging. The picture, the marketing materials look bad. It's, you know, you can't sell something if it doesn't present well.
You can't sell. So presentation, that's key. If it doesn't present well, we've got to fix that first. Second is pricing. Is it priced properly? Right? And then third is patience. And I always say, like, sometimes it does present well, and I think it's priced well, and it's patience, which is by far the hardest thing for anyone, developers, sellers, and you know, no one wants this. No one wants patience in life, but you know, and I think I'll have to say, because we're on this call today. What's today? Today's the 20th, I believe, of December, and we, like the last 6 falls, have had to practice patience in September and October and most Novembers, because things just in the condo market, but really in general, some of the single family, they just weren't selling, but like they were in the spring, right? And the falls have been slow. And I always say, I'll tell you if we need to lower the price, because it presents itself well. I think we're priced right, but if we're not selling, it's often priced. But there's a difference of moving that price versus patience. In the last 2 weeks, we have sold more, my team has sold more than we have in the last 6 weeks. Because we've been patient, and now buyers are pulling the trigger. But
it's interesting. Like, it used to be that winters were sort of slow many years ago, but more often now, it's like the fall's really slow, and then it starts picking up about now.
It does, and the patients suck, right? And you do have to know then when to lower your pricing, because it is price, versus being patient and know that, you know, if you lower your price today, it doesn't matter. It's still going to take 6 weeks to sell. But then what do you do in 6 weeks when the market picks up? Do you lower it again? So there's a chance of dropping it. But so it goes back down to your marketing, the piece, presentation, pricing, and potentially patience.
Yeah, and I think that one other thing you hit on a minute ago that's important is, you know, really having a relationship with your agent, right? So like Trent, you know, many people know that he's the only real estate agent who's ever sold my development product. And it's for good reason. A, you know, I like him. B, I trust him. And C, like having a trusted relationship with somebody who will tell you, like, hey, Brian, this is your exit pricing. You know, when I'm looking at analyzing a deal, that's important to me. Like, I want to know that somebody's not bullshitting me just to get a listing, you know. And then when you have that conversation where you need to lower the price, I want to know somebody's not just trying to unload it because they're busy and they don't want to deal with it, and drop it 50 grand or 100 grand because they want to take it, you know, off their plate. So I'm sure Trent would agree that, like, whether you hire him and his team or someone else, like, it's better to have a real relationship with an agent that you can build over time so that you trust their exit numbers, you know, and you trust their judgment, than it is to, like, be shopping around for the best
deal. It's so true. I mean, I think, you know, we lose listings sometimes, usually not with repeat clients, but with newer clients, because they don't like the pricing we're giving them. But, you know, in all reality, I don't get paid unless it sells. So there's zero incentive for me to tell you a price that I think it's higher than it really is. And you know, like with you and with a lot of my clients, you know, yes, if they buy a project, it's going to sell. I'm going to make money, and if they overpaid for the project on the front end, it's kind of their risk more than mine. It's not my money. But if they do that, they're going to get out of the business quickly. They're going to blame, and often I will say, the first person that a developer, you know, blames when things aren't selling is usually the real estate agent.
Yeah.
So, you know, what also may happen is I may go and support this high price, and when they're not getting it, instead of them lowering the price and me selling it, they're just going to go to another agent first because they're convinced it's the agent, because it
Right.
definitely wasn't the developer that overpaid for the
Well, right,
project.
it wasn't the developer, and you've been selling small condo projects for over 20 years, and so I guess you don't really know what you're doing, but
Right.
the other guy does.
Yeah,
and
you
maybe
got
like the younger, newer guy, he might know more than you somehow.
Exactly. So, so there's that balance. So for us, I look at projects, and like I would be if I was the developer, and I've often told you, like other developers, why are we buying this? It doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
Yeah.
Where are these comps coming from? So
No, I totally agree. Well, listen, I appreciate all the insight today. It's been incredibly helpful. If anybody has any more questions, obviously you can reach out to us or reach out to Trent and his team. But thanks again for your time today, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon, Trent.
that's great. Appreciate it, Brian. Thank
See ya.
you.